So, good morning, my dear students and friend. I'm Professor Urusilias. I'm teaching in Department of Wildlife Sciences since more than 15 years, and apart from teaching is my passion, and apart from that, I'm also involved in projects. I have completed many projects on ungulates of Himalayas, ungulates of Central India, and presently I have got a ANRF SERB project to work on the Himalayan Thar. Himalayan Thar is a goat like antelope. It's between the goat and antelope, and this is a very important species, and presence of this species is the indicator of the good habitat. So, we are trying to do the conservation, to develop the conservation strategies for this species. So, here I will be dealing with the international policies on biodiversity conservation, a global perspective on protecting our planet's biodiversity. So, this is a series of lecture I will be delivering. I think 14 or 15 lecture I will be delivering related to this topic. And so, basically we are dealing with the master students, and for the environmental studies we have already developed one module environmental with the name environmental studies, and that is a very successful, the third most successful course developed by AMU at NPTEL. So, let us start with the international policies on biodiversity conservation. Um, before we talk about the policies, before we talk about the treaties and the formation of treaties, we should know what is biodiversity. I believe by now you have fair understanding of the biodiversity. So, biodiversity is actually the variety of all living things on earth, including plants, animal and ecosystem. So, when we talk about the biodiversity, it does not mean we are only talking about the flora and fauna of the forest. So, whatever is growing in your kitchen garden, whether it is a coriander, papaya, lettuce, whatever, that's all will come under the biodiversity. So, biodiversity is every living thing existing on the earth is biodiversity, and it is important because we are totally dependent on the biodiversity, whether it's a food, clothes, house, everything we are taking from the nature. Whatever is growing, we are using in different forms. So, the importance of biodiversity is biodiversity keeps ecosystem balanced, provide food and resources and help regulate the climate. So, it is the biodiversity, it is the green plant, it is the animals who actually regulate the climate, and we know what is happening with the climate because of our wrong practices. Biodiversity not only important to balance and regulate the climate, but also it provides the ecosystem services. Biodiversity supports pollination, clean water and healthy soil, which are essential for human life. So, services also they are providing, and current crisis with the biodiversity is our own activity. Biodiversity supports our own activities, like human activities are causing species to disappear at an alarming rate, threatening ecosystem and the services they provide. So, it is we are, so with the nature everything is there for the need, but nature cannot provide, cannot fulfill the greed of human being. So, if we utilize the resources judiciously, we are fine, the environment is fine, but what we are doing it, we are extracting more than required. So, that is why biodiversity is under threat. And the example of the biodiversity loss is the habitat destruction, pollution and overfishing are leading causes of species decline. What we are doing, habitat destruction, we are entering in the animal habitat, we are entering into the natural habitat, and what we are doing, We are cutting the habitat, we are cutting the trees for the urbanization. We are making houses for ourselves. Fine, expansion is important. With the growing population, human population, expansion is important. But if you are cutting 10 trees, we should plant 100 trees. That is how we can sustain the environment, we can sustain the climate. So, these are the reasons, these are the significant output for the habitat destruction because of the biodiversity loss. The biodiversity loss is actually the habitat destruction, pollution. You go in Delhi during the Diwali, it's all smog, or it's all smog because of the smoke. And the asthmatic patient, for them it's very difficult to sustain, and every house is using oxygen purifier. So these are the significant changes we are watching, we are experiencing. Overfishing and leading causes of species decline. So these are the, if we are, habitat destruction means it's not the loss of the plants but also loss of the home for many animal and bird species. Pollution, overfishing in aquatic ecosystem. If it is overfishing means we are actually overfishing is the causes for the decline of the species. So this is the about the biodiversity is important, ecosystem services, crisis, what are the crises and what are the example of the biodiversity loss. So to protect the biodiversity, to protect, to conserve the biodiversity, to save the planet, there is a global need from all the countries, the demand from all the countries that there should be some policy, something. If we cut all the trees from India, somehow the neighboring country will be suffering. So climate is not one country's priority, one country's property. Rather, it is for the conservation of the biodiversity, for conservation of the planet. We have to have some international policies to target, to address the global problems. So, biodiversity loss, what are the global problems? The biodiversity loss affect everyone, no matter where you live, and no country can tackle it alone. Neither India, nor America, nor Britain can tackle it alone, because it is the global concern. It is the global crisis. One country cannot do. There has to be the countries, many countries who can come together and resolve this issue, to solve the problem. And this is not the one country responsibility. There should be shared responsibilities. Countries need to work together, because species and ecosystem cross borders. For the species and the ecosystem, the political boundaries doesn't matter. There are many national parks, there are many protected areas which are at the international boundaries. They don't bother about the political boundary. If animal has to move from India to Nepal, they will. If the animal has to move from India to Pakistan, they will. They don't bother, they don't know the political boundary. It's for the human being, not for the animals. So there are overlapping ecological issues which we have to address. So it is a shared responsibility, because countries need to work together, because species and ecosystem cross borders. Collaborative solution, international policies help protect wildlife, manage resources and tackle climate change together. So we cannot do it alone. We need cooperation from different countries. There are many migratory species. Animal like birds and whales move across countries. Whale from one place to another place. It has no boundary. It never bother about the boundary, doesn't know about the boundary. Whales, if they have to swim in an ocean, they cross the countries to countries. So they across the countries they travel. So international effort are essential to address such issues for the conservation. Only one country cannot, because the animal is traveling from one country to another country to third country. So like this. So we have to address all these issues. And there should be a global frameworks and works agreement like the Convention on Biological Diversity and CITES guide nation in protecting biodiversity. There are many conventions for conservation and protection of the biodiversity. There are conventions to control the international trade and protect the biodiversity, conserve the biodiversity. So, we will take up with the Convention on the Biological Diversity, that is also known as the CBD. CBD, it was a global need to have some convention which can actually control the or you can say the conserve the global biodiversity. The nation, every nation should have their right over their product, genetic material. If neem is growing in India, no other country should take the patent out of the neem. If turmeric is growing in India, nowhere else, so turmeric, there should be a sovereign right over the turmeric. We should have the sovereign right over the turmeric. It's our project because it is growing in our countries. Okay, so to address these issues, like what we are doing, we know many things, uses of haldi since ages. We know that if there is a cut mark, you just put the haldi and it will be okay. If you have body ache, milk and haldi will work wonder. We know everything. We know the properties of the haldi, turmeric. We know the importance of the turmeric in our life, but there is no documentation. So, because of the lack of the documentation, what the other countries are doing, they are taking the property, they are developed countries, they are taking the haldi and they are identifying the properties and taking the patent, claiming the patent that we have discovered the properties. No, we already know and we are using since ages, generation to generation we are using it. Haldi lep is good for the, is a very good mask. Haldi with milk is a painkiller. Haldi on wound is a healer. So we know all the properties of the haldi. The only thing is that there was no documentation, and the other countries, the developed countries, are taking our product and claiming the patent, claiming that this is our discovery and writing it down, penning it down. So, to overcome with all these issues, to resolve these issues, there was a need of the global convention, and that convention was the Convention on the Biological Diversity. It was Convention on the Biological Diversity took place in 1992 in Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. So, in 1992 and much before 1992, it was conceived because every nation was facing these issues that they are growing something and somebody else is taking the credit of that product. Haldi we know, but some other country, developed countries are taking advantage that we have discovered. No, we are already using it. It is in our daily practice. We are putting haldi in our all the meals. Most of the meals we are using haldi. Most of the medicine we are using haldi. For everything we are using haldi. So it is our sovereign right. This is our property. We have discovered and we are using since ages and ages. So we should have the sovereign right over the haldi, over the turmeric. So, these issues were addressed under the Convention on the Biological Diversity, and this convention took place in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, and there were three main goals, three main objectives of the CBD. The conservation of biological diversity, yes, every nation should make effort to conserve the biodiversity, and not only the conservation but also they should do the sustainable utilization of the biodiversity. And third and the most important objective of this convention, of this treaty, was fair and equitable sharing of benefits from genetic resources. If some developing country is providing the genetic material, for example haldi, to some developed country, advanced country, so the developed country has to share the benefits arising out of the medicinal property. If they are making something out of haldi, they have to share the profit, and commercializing it, they have to share the profit, and the sovereign right over the genetic material will be of us. We will be having the sovereign right. They can never file the patent, they can never claim that this is their product. Whatever they are going to make, they have to give us the share from the profit. So, the third was the very important, and record more than 180 countries signed the convention, because every country was facing this issue. They wanted to have the sovereign right over their own genetic material of their country. So, conservation of biodiversity, sustainable utilization, and the third and the most important objective, or you can say goal, was the fair and equitable sharing of benefits from genetic resources. The key protocol, after that there were lots of COPs, Conference of the Parties under the CBD, and in one of the COP there was a Cartagena protocol in 2003, and under the Cartagena protocol it was the focus was on the biosafety, regulating the movement of living modified organism between countries to ensure safety for biodiversity and the human health. If you are transferring one living organism from one country to another country, there should be a proper protocol. Countries have to follow the proper protocol, and the safety of the living organism is must. That is the priority of any transfer from one country to another country. So, that was decided in the Cartagena protocol in 2003. And one more protocol is very important. There are many COPs, Conference of the Parties, but Nagoya Protocol in 2010 took place in Nagoya, and this provides a legal framework for fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the use of genetic resources, ensuring countries and communities are compensated. This is what we discussed. The third objective, fair and equitable sharing. So, this provides a legal framework. If some developed country wants to use the genetic resources of India, they have to follow a legal framework. So, Nagoya Protocol provides a legal framework for the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the use of genetic resources, ensuring countries and communities are compensated. If turmeric is grown by some villagers, so they should be compensated for providing the genetic material to any country. So, this is the most important aspect, this is the most important framework, this was the most important protocol, that is the Nagoya Protocol. That is the legal framework for the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising from the use of genetic resources, ensuring countries and communities are compensated. Then there were Aichi target in 2010, 2011 and 2020, and Aichi target, actually there are 20 global targets to stop biodiversity loss. So, out of 20 global targets, the 3 targets are very important, 3 Aichi target. Aichi target 5, reduce habitat loss. What is happening? Because of the extempore or illegal cutting, clearing of the forests for the urbanization or for development of the factories, what is happening? We are losing the habitat. Losing the habitat means we are losing the green cover. Not only green cover is important for this carbon sequestration to reduce the global warming, but also green cover is very important for species using and living in these areas. Those species could be birds, mammals, herpetofauna, lots of bacteria, lots of microorganisms. So, the whole ecosystem we are destroying by clearing the habitat. So, the target 5 is the reduce habitat loss. We should make effort to reduce the habitat loss, and Aichi target 11 is protect 17% of land and 10% of marine areas. We have to, this is compulsory to protect at least 17% of the land and 10% of the marine area, and the third target, Aichi target 12 is about the prevent the species from the extinction. Every species is important for humankind. When I was working in Uttaranchal Himalayas in 1998, 99, in late 90s, Texas bacata was a tree people were cutting and using as a fuel wood at the high altitude. Texas bacata is also known as the Bhojpatra. But during that time, when I entered in the Himalayas, at high altitude Himalayas, I came to know that Texas bacata is a very, very important plant, and the government is trying to protect this species because this is the plant which contains the taxol, and taxol is one of the important gradient, one of the important component for cancer curing medicine. We are still fighting with the cancer. We are still not able to cure the cancer, and many patients from the cancer are dying. So every species, every animal, we have not yet explored from where we can get the medicine for different disease, which new disease are coming. Those diseases were existing, those abnormalities was existing since ages. The only thing is that now we are able to diagnose. We are able to diagnose cancer, we are able to diagnose AIDS, we are able to diagnose many species which were not, people used to die with unknown disease, with unknown abnormalities, but at least now we are able to diagnose. We have such a great infrastructure, we have such a good doctor, we have such a good facility. So diagnosis of any disease, diagnosis of any abnormalities is very, very important. So diagnosis and the cure, that cure is from the medicine, because of the medicine, and most of the component, the chemical components are coming from the nature. Those product could be the plant, those products could be the animals, any kind of animals. So it is very important to prevent the species extinction. Not only for this, but also we have to create the gene pool, we have to protect the gene pool. So prevent species extinction is very, very important. So there are 3 important targets under the Aichi target. Out of 20 Aichi target, 3 are very important. Target 5, reduce habitat loss. Target 11, protect 17% of land and 10% of marine system. And target 12 is prevent species extinction. There are challenges. Many targets were not fully met in 2020, highlighting the need for stronger effort in the future. Post 2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, a new global plan aiming to reserve biodiversity loss by 2030, and ambitious target like protecting 30% of land and sea by 2030. And the key achievement, over 190 countries committed, protected area expansion, genetic resource access agreement. The second convention, the second global agreement was the CITES. CITES is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna. The trade was going on. The international trade was going on. The product which is found in one country are being sold in another country. So to resolve these issues, the CITES was important, CITES was must. And the CITES, this convention took place in 1973 and came into force in 1975 to ensure that international trade in wild animal and plant does not threaten their survival. There are 3 appendix in CITES, Appendix 1, Appendix 2 and Appendix 3, and these whole CITES work on the licensing system. Appendix 1 includes species threatened with extinction. Trade is prohibited except in exceptional cases. So the most threatened species fall under the Appendix 1. Appendix 2 is a species not necessarily threatened but may become endangered if trade is not controlled. And Appendix 3 is about the species that are protected in at least one country which have asked for help in controlling the trade. So this is the 3 appendix, and these 3 appendix works on 3 different license: import license, export license, re-import license, and certification of the origin of the species. If a species is found in one country, the country have to provide the certificate of the origin of the species, and the country which is taking the product of that species has to receive the license that they are going to receive this product which is actually protected only in this country from where they are asking. So, this is all the certification system, licensing system. All three appendix work on 3 license. We will be dealing with CITES in detail. And global partnership, record 183 countries are the member of the CITES and work through a system of permit and certification of species covered by CITES. Impact, what is the impact of the CITES? CITES came into force in 1975 and it actually regulates the trade of over 38,000 species of animal and plants, reduce illegal trade of endangered species like elephants and tiger. There are challenges. Illegal wildlife trades continue despite regulation. Whatever regulation you make, still illegal activities going on, and these are the challenges. Limited enforcement. We do not have enough infrastructure, enough people to actually enforce the CITES. Demand for wildlife products remain high in certain countries. Tiger, for example, tiger skin is in demand. Still people are using the tiger leather jacket, tiger skin jacket and all the products. Chinese are crazy about the tiger because more than 400 species medicines having the product of the tiger. From bone to the urine, they are using everything to make the medicine, and all those medicines are being sold in market. The third important convention, the agreement, the treaty was the Ramsar Convention on Wetland. Wetlands are very, very important because they recharge the water body and they are considered as the lung of the earth. So, wetland, it was important, and the wetlands were threatened because the wetlands the area around the wetlands are very, very fertile, and the farmers are actually encroaching the areas to have more and more land, more and more fertile land, and this is what is we are experiencing in UP, Delhi and all those areas which are having the wetlands. Wetlands are vanishing, and wetlands are the important site for the migratory birds. Lots of birds comes and stay, take the shelter in the wetlands. So, it was the convention took place in 1971 in Ramsar. Ramsar is a site in their run, and because convention took place in Ramsar, that is why it is called as the Ramsar Convention. And the main purpose of this convention was sustainable use of wetland through local and national action and international cooperation. The key feature, wetland of international importance, over 2,400 globally covering 254 million hectares. 3 pillars of the Ramsar Convention: wise use of wetlands, list and protect Ramsar site, international cooperation on transboundary wetlands. Global participation, there are 122 members countries. Countries must designate at least one wetland for inclusion in Ramsar list. If India has to be want to be the part of the Ramsar Convention, they should sign the convention at least with one wetland. That okay, this is the wetland we have identified, and it is very, very important to conserve it. This wetland need a global cooperation. So, we have many wetlands, Ramsar site, many wetlands as of Ramsar site. For example, Keladev National Park is a wetland, the Chilka Lake. So, these are the important wetlands which has been listed in the Ramsar list, and we are getting the global cooperation for the conservation. Wetlands are critical for biodiversity, water purification, food control, flood control and carbon storage. Wetlands provide habitat for endangered species and are vital for ecosystem services. There are challenges like wetland degradation and loss due to urbanization, agriculture and climate change. Underfunding for wetland conservation effort. Funding is a major issue in most of the policies. The next cooperation is the UNESCO Man and Biosphere program. we were only talking about the animals, biodiversity, plants, flora and fauna. But plants and animals are not only important, but the people living in those areas are also important. So, MAB, man and animal, man and biosphere, is a very, very important program of the UNESCO, where the whole area is being protected, including biodiversity and the cultural biodiversity, including the human beings. So, it was launched in 1971 by UNESCO, and the purpose to promote the sustainable relationship between human and the environment by conserving biodiversity and fostering sustainable development. Biosphere reserves, under this we declare many biosphere reserves, special areas designated to promote the balance between conservation and human activities, 738 reserves in 134 countries as of 2021, covering both terrestrial and coastal ecosystem. Zone A approach, there are every biosphere reserve has got the zones. So, core area, buffer zone and transitional zone. Core area is strictly prohibited, protected for biodiversity conservation. Buffer zone, limited access of the human activities which supports the conservation. Transitional area, sustainable economic and human activities. There are main goals: conservation, development and research and education. And the significance is the promotes global collaboration of the sustainability, serve as living laboratories for experimenting with sustainable practices. There are challenges: inconsistent implementation across region, balancing development and conservation in population area. IPBP, International Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. It established, formed in 2012 by over 130 government to bridge the gap between science and policy on biodiversity. Purpose to strengthen the dialogues between science and policymakers in order to protect biodiversity and ecosystem services. The key functions: assessments, produces global, regional and thematic assessments of biodiversity and ecosystem services. Policy support, provides policymakers with tools and method for making informed decision on biodiversity conservation. Capacity building, support nation in strengthening the science policy interface. So, these are the key function of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. Global influences, known for its Global Assessment Report 2019, which highlight that 1 million species are at risk of extinction, help shape global discussion around biodiversity loss and sustainable use. And main area of the focus are the land degradation, pollination, invasive species. Challenges: translating science into policy, it's a difficult at the faster rate. And funding gap is implementing recommendation. IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature, established in 1948, oldest organization to conserve nature and ensure the sustainable use of natural resources. And the key role of the IUCN is the IUCN Red List, the world's most comprehensive inventory of global conservation status of species, assigning over 1,42,500 species. And there are different categories under the IUCN: least concern, vulnerable, endangered, critically endangered, extinct in wild, extinct and data deficient. There are certain species on which there is no work. So we consider those species that we still do not know the status. So, we keep under the category of the data deficient. There are other initiatives: protected areas, support the establishment and management of the protected areas like national park and wildlife sanctuaries, species survival commission, over 10,000 experts globally working on species conservation. Global impact play a key advisory role in global environment conventions such as CBD and CITES. This is the part of almost all the convention. Lead conservation projects worldwide. There are challenges, growing threat of habitat destruction and ensuring effective action despite funding constraints. GEF, Global Environment Facility, founded in 1991. The main purpose of GEF is provide funding to address global environmental issues including biodiversity conservation, climate change and land degradation. How it works: partnership, work with 183 countries, private sectors and NGOs to fund projects that protect the environment. Basically, the main goal of the GEF is to provide the funding. Funding is the main issue in all the conservation activities. So, provide grants to developing countries for projects that promote sustainable development and biodiversity protection. And key areas of focus: biodiversity conservation, climate change mitigation, sustainable land management and international waters, protect freshwater and marine ecosystem. Impact: it provides over $22 billion in grant and leverages $120 billion in co-financial for environmental projects, funded over 5,000 projects worldwide. And the challenges: sustainable long-term impact of funded project, ensuring equitable access of funding especially for vulnerable region. There are challenges in global biodiversity policies, enforcement issues, that is the main challenge. Lack of resource and weak government in some region lead to poor enforcement of law. Conflicting interests, economic development. Climate change accelerates biodiversity loss affecting species and ecosystem. Funding gaps, insufficient financial support in almost all the biodiversity policies. Lack of coordination. International cooperation is hampered by political differences and unequal capacity across nation. Bureaucracy delay. Slow decision making process hinder quick responses to urge biodiversity threats. There are success stories: protected area, expansion of global protected area including marine reserves and national parks, species recovery program. For example, grey whale and Iberian lynx, both of which have rebounded through targeted conservation efforts. Community-led conservation: indigenous and local communities are playing key role in conservation, with example like Tanzanian wildlife management area and Bolivia's indigenous protected area. Conservation innovation: technologies such as camera trap, drones and satellite tracking are transforming wildlife monitoring, poaching prevention and species research. So, there are success story under this constraint. Restoration projects, large scale restoration efforts like Bond Challenge have successfully restored millions of hectares of degraded land. Species reintroduction program like reintroduction in the Californian condor and Arabian oryx. Coral reef restoration. Coral reef, we know the Great Barrier Reef, the largest coral reef in Australia, is threatened. So, coral nurseries and reef restoration projects have been successfully in rehabilitating damaged coral ecosystem, particularly in places like the Great Barrier Reef. Forest restoration efforts such as reforestation in Costa Rica have led to the recovery of forest ecosystem, promoting biodiversity and carbon sequestration and wetland conservation. Everglades restoration project in the USA are restoring critical wetland habitat that supports diverse species. And future direction and key goals: post 2020 global biodiversity framework, nature based solution, leveraging ecosystem for climate change adaptation with strategies like reforestation, wetland restoration and coastal protection to enhance biodiversity while mitigating climate impacts. Financing biodiversity innovation: financial mechanisms such as carbon credits, biodiversity offsets and payment of ecosystem services. Integration of biodiversity in development: embedding biodiversity conservation into broader economic development plan to ensure long-term environmental sustainability. Technological innovation: advances in remote sensing, genetic research and AI-driven conservation tools are helping monitor biodiversity and forces environmental policies more effectively. So the conclusion is global biodiversity policy like CBD, Paris Agreement and CITES are crucial for safeguarding ecosystem. Call to action: urgent need for continuous international cooperation, strong enforcement and a collective commitment to biodiversity target at local, national and global level. Future outlook: addressing challenges like climate change, habitat fragmentation and illegal wildlife trade will require innovative solution and global dedication to conserve. Role of stakeholders is very, very important. Active participation from government, private sectors, local communities and NGOs is essential for meeting biodiversity goals. And public awareness: enhancing public engagement and awareness about biodiversity can drive policy changes and promote sustainable practices globally. So this is all about the today's lecture. I hope you enjoyed and got some knowledge. Thank you very much, and we are meeting again in my next lecture. Thank you.